For decades, we've been going around and around in circles about fairness in standardized tests like the SAT. It's this really heated, complicated debate that honestly often feels like it's stuck on a loop. But what if we've been arguing about the wrong thing this whole time? Today, we're diving into some fascinating research that gives us a completely new lens to look at this problem. It suggests that some of what we call bias, well, it might just be a statistical mirage.
And it all boils down to this one simple-sounding question, right? Is the SAT fair? The paper we're looking at today calls this a thorny and unresolved societal concern. And wow, that feels like a massive understatement. This question has huge implications for everything: college admissions, social mobility, even how we define what merit is.
So, for years, the conventional wisdom, backed by a ton of research, has consistently pointed to this really strange finding. For minority students, especially Black and Hispanic students, the SAT often overpredicts how they'll do in their first year of college. What that means is the test score suggests they'll get a higher GPA than they actually end up with, on average. And this has been the central nagging puzzle in the whole test bias debate.
And that really is the SAT's thorny problem. I mean, this overprediction thing isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. It's a deep, complex issue that researchers and universities have been wrestling with for a long, long time, with no clear answer for why it keeps happening. But here's where things get really interesting. What if focusing on that final prediction, the college GPA, is like trying to solve a mystery by only reading the last page of the book? This research suggests that maybe, just maybe, the real clues are hidden way earlier in the process, in the actual mechanics of the test itself. So let's do that. Let's pop the hood on the SAT score. And to do that, you need to understand this one crucial distinction that is at the heart of this entire analysis. It's the difference between the number you see on the page and the ability it's supposed to be measuring. Okay, so on one side, you've got the observed score. That's easy. It's the 650 or the 720 you get on your score report. But the people who design these tests, psychometricians, they know this number is just an estimate. It's trying to measure something we can't actually see, your true underlying ability. They call that the latent score. So think of it this way. Your latent ability is your actual knowledge, and the observed score is just a photo of that knowledge. And you know how photos can be? Blurry, bad lighting, weird angle. It's not always a perfect picture of reality. And the researchers had this awesome metaphor to explain why this all matters. They say that by shifting our focus from that blurry photo, the observed score, to the reality underneath, the latent score, we basically get X-ray vision. This lets us see past the surface-level numbers and really understand the hidden structures that might be causing the group differences we see. So with this X-ray vision in mind, we can start to see that for a test to be truly fair, it has to do two totally separate jobs, and it has to do them perfectly. Because if it messes up the first job, it's pretty much guaranteed to fail at the second one. Okay, job number one is something called measurement invariance. The easiest way to think about it is this. Is the test an accurate and unbent ruler for everyone? Imagine you have a metal ruler that gets just a tiny bit longer on hot days. Well, it's not a fair measurement tool anymore, right? It would consistently give you the wrong length. A test has to be like a perfect, unbending ruler. It has to measure the same underlying ability in the exact same way for every single person, no matter their background. Then you have job number two, prediction invariance. And this is what most of the debate has been about. Does the measurement we get from our ruler fairly predict something in the future, like college GPA? But you can see the problem, right? If our ruler is bent to begin with, if it fails that first test of measurement invariance, how on earth can we trust its predictions? The two jobs are completely connected. Let's just walk through this chain of events because it's really the core of the whole argument. It starts with your true unseen ability. Then, at step two, the test comes in and tries to measure it. This is the moment where that bend in the ruler can happen. That flawed measurement then creates your observed test score at step three. And then finally, that potentially flawed score is used to make a prediction at step four. You see? A problem at step two poisons everything that follows. And this is the absolute key insight. For decades, we've been focused on step four, arguing about whether the predictions are skewed. But this research says that's looking at the problem backwards. We should be looking at step two. If the test itself is a biased ruler for some groups, then of course its predictions are going to be skewed. The prediction bias is a symptom, not the disease. All right, so this brings us to the really cool part. What did the researchers actually find when they pointed this X-ray vision at real-world data? They got their hands on information from the College Board, covering 176 different colleges and universities over a couple of years.
For their big case study, they put one specific part of the test right under the microscope, the SAT math section. They looked at the performance of Black students versus white students and Hispanic students versus white students. And what they found when they looked at that hidden, latent ability was honestly pretty striking. Okay, get this. This is a big one. The researchers found that when they looked at Black students and white students who had the exact same underlying true math ability, the Black students' observed scores on the SAT math were on average almost a third of a standard deviation lower. Let me just say that again. Same true ability, different observed score. The differences for Hispanic students were a bit smaller, but they were still there. I mean, the conclusion here is pretty hard to ignore. The SAT math test was not acting like an unbent ruler. It was systematically undermeasuring the true ability of Black and Hispanic students compared to white students. This is a measurement problem happening way before we ever get to making a prediction. And you can see exactly how this bent ruler messes everything up down the line. When the researchers looked at different groups of students, in the groups where they found this measurement bias, they also found that classic prediction bias 66% of the time. But in the groups where the ruler was straight, where there was no measurement bias, they only saw prediction bias about 35% of the time. A bent ruler was a huge red flag for a skewed prediction. But here is the real mic drop moment of this entire study. After the researchers found the bend in the ruler, they could actually correct for it with statistics. So they reran all their numbers, but this time, they based everything on the more accurate, latent scores. And when they did that, almost a quarter of the prediction bias that we have been arguing about for decades just vanished. It just wasn't really there. It was a statistical ghost created by a flawed measurement tool in the first place. So this brings us all the way back to our original question. Is the bias a mirage? Well, what this research strongly suggests is that a pretty big chunk of it might be. The way we've been looking at it, the way we've been measuring it, has in some ways been an illusion. The authors of the paper put it perfectly themselves. They say, observed scores are, in part, a mirage because they're not an accurate representation of what is going on under the surface. That number you see on the score report, it's not the whole truth. It's a reflection. And this study shows that for some students, that reflection is seriously distorted. So what's the big picture here? What should you take away from all this? Well, first, that a huge part of our public debate about test bias might be pointed in the wrong direction. We're arguing about the symptom, the prediction, instead of the disease, the measurement. Second, if we actually want to make tests fairer, the first, most important step is to make sure they're a fair ruler for everyone. You have to fix the measurement problem first. And finally, this whole X-ray idea gives us a powerful new tool to figure out why these differences happen so we can actually get to work on fixing them. And that kind of leaves us with one final big question to chew on. We rely on numbers like these to make huge decisions every single day, not just for getting into college, but for getting a job, a loan, even in performance reviews. If a test as closely watched as the SAT can have these kinds of hidden flaws in its ruler, what other numbers that shape our lives deserve their own X-ray?